Okay, we'll get started here. Thank you both for coming in. We are happy to welcome the Port of Vancouver Commissioner candidates for position number 2 on the Port Commission. Eric LeBrant and Lisa Ross. Thank you for coming in, and congratulations both on advancing to the general election. So it should be able to have a little more in-depth, intimate conversation here than last time when we had a large field of candidates. So we'll continue to explore some of the same issues, but like I said, hopefully dig a little deeper on those. As you know, I'm Greg Jane, editorial page editor at the Columbian, and I believe you met everybody else. And just to clarify, we are videotaping this for use on our website, as always. So why don't we start with some introductions. We'll give you a minute to introduce yourselves and explain very briefly why voters should support you in the upcoming election. And we'll start with Eric.
Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you for hosting. My name is Eric LeBrant, and I'm running for Port of Vancouver Commissioner. My background is I grew up in the Portland, Vancouver area, and I've chaired the Fruit Valley Neighborhood Association for the last 4.5 years. And that role is, kind of involves building a healthy community. Fruit Valley in particular, because of its blue collar roots, involves building a healthy economic community too. And I kind of see the Port Commission as a sort of an expansion of that role, making sure that our economy has a good, strong business foundation. My background is in accounts receivable. I've worked in that field for about 12 years now, and I just want to see a strong, vibrant, not just Fruit Valley, but Port of Vancouver, and watch the rest of our city grow with it.
Great, thank you. Lisa?
My name is Lisa Ross, and I have lived in Hazeldale with my family for 12 years. I was actually born in Oak Harbor, and spent most of my formative years in the South. I have an MBA and a CPA certification. I have experience working in transportation, government, and nonprofits, and I'm currently serving on the Clark County Public Facilities District Board, which governs the fairgrounds and the Hilton downtown. And I believe that I have the business background and experience and public experience also, because I've done a lot of volunteering with the Republican Party. I'm currently the vice chair of the Clark County Republican Party. And I really think that I can bring the business sense to the port so that we don't ruin the job force and the economic engine that is the port. I think that the most important thing that the Port Commissioner should be concentrated on is economic development, because that's their mission, and that they should not be concerned, they should be concerned with the community, but their main focus is a political organization and a public-private. I am a little scattered today. The port is too important to have someone running against tenants of the port.
Great, thank you. We'll get started. Obviously, the big issue is the proposed oil terminal at the port. We'll start. Eric, what are your thoughts on that? And for both of you, if you're in favor of it, why? And if opposed, what is the next step? We'll start with Eric.
Well, I consider myself pro-jobs, and so I'm opposed to the oil terminal. Vancouver's ranked as one of the top 100 most livable cities in the United States, and that's a pretty powerful asset when we're trying to recruit businesses to locate here. I just got back from a trip to the Texas Gulf Coast, and town after town after town, the downtown core is just gone. It's boarded up businesses, it's abandoned buildings, it's for sale signs. And it's very, very consistent. And over 100 Vancouver businesses have come out in opposition to the oil terminal as well. And I think that really speaks loudly about the risk that we face. It's not a great plan to just say, well, let's grab the first the first batch of oil jobs that we can grab. I mean, we really need long-term solutions that are going to make sense in the context of Vancouver. You know, we've got people paying taxes as far out as almost to Camas, and that tax investment that they're paying has to have a return on investment all the way out there. So it has to make sense for our economy as a whole, not just whether or not it creates a handful of jobs or generates a little bit of revenue on the port footprint itself. It sends ripples out into the rest of Vancouver, and we really need to be mindful of that.
Lisa, your thoughts on the terminal?
Well, I believe if the oil terminal is properly cited by FSEC, that it will be deemed safe enough to be here. And I support the kind of jobs that the oil terminal brings. We need all kinds of jobs in our economy. We can't just have high tech, and we can't just have low tech. We've got to have the whole range. And that jobs, places like Vancouver Energy would bring jobs that are worth a family wage, not that just pay a family wage, that are actually worth a family wage to a company. And we need those sorts of jobs. But with freight, and the port is mainly a conduit for freight. It is a window to the world for the United States and our products, and also to bring them in. And you can't always predict what freight is going to be flowing. And right now, the freight that is trying to flow is the oil from the Bakken oil fields to the ocean. And currently, and forever, Vancouver will be the most economical and most environmentally friendly way to get that oil to the ocean, to American-made ships with American crews going to American ports. There's jobs not just at Vancouver Energy, but jobs on the ship. There's longshore jobs. There's all sorts of jobs, not to mention the construction jobs. And people like to blow off the construction jobs and say, oh, but they're just temporary. Well, that's what construction is. It is a temporary job. It's a constant flow of temporary jobs. And you need to have jobs in the pipeline to keep those construction jobs going too.
And one question on that, you said if it is approved by FSEC, then
Yes.
we can deem it safe.
Right,
or
it's
safe
not my
enough.
job to
Right,
judge if it's
right. I
safe.
can understand that, but I think the question then becomes, what about the next terminal, or
Right.
what about the next proposal? So if you had been on the board 2 years ago, would you have approved this terminal as it is now and sent it on to FSEC?
Well, the signing of the lease begins the FSEC process. So without
So would you have signed that lease?
Yes, I would have signed that
Okay.
lease. Absolutely, I would have signed that lease.
Eric, would you have approved it as it stands?
As it stands, no. I mean, we didn't have enough information, and I think that brings up kind of the question too of where does it end? You know, is it just an oil terminal? Do we what happens if someone shows up and offers us a refinery? You know, would we approve that? I would say no. You know, if we got offered a coal terminal, do we want to turn Vancouver into that? I would say no to that too. I think the job of a good leader and of a port commissioner is to have that discretion to say, yeah, this is a good idea, or no, this is a terrible idea. That's the whole reason that we as taxpayers get to vote on that and put people in those seats.
No, and Lisa, I believe during an interview you said that if the oil terminal falls through, then you would support a coal terminal here. Is that accurate?
That is not exactly what
Okay,
I said.
what did you
I
say?
said is right now the port is not pursuing any other energy clients because they're full of energy clients, and they would like to keep a diverse group of tenants in the port. But if this were to fall through and we did not have a big energy client, we've got that big unit track, so that yes, I would say that I would not exclude coal from the conversation.
Let me ask, and I think in some ways Eric had already answered this question, but he's welcome to weigh in. But Lisa, when you first spoke about your view on what the mission for the port was,
Right.
fair enough, you slipped a little bit for a second and caught yourself. But it really, to me, gets to the crux of this point. Your mission is, as you accurately stated, it is to bring industry and work
Responsibly.
responsibly and safely. But at the end of the day, you have a port which is within the city.
Right.
The city council has voted that they don't like the idea.
Right.
You can make an argument that the city has this I guess what you would call more global view as to what they want their city to be, although they're also interested in jobs and infrastructure. And it feels like when you get so parochially invested in this mission that you don't see or recognize this larger mission that's at play, which is what do we want Vancouver to be? So how do you answer that question when people say you're too focused on the jobs that this might bring and not focused enough on what people want Vancouver to be?
I don't feel, well, I've never been asked that question that way. So
Here I am.
that's good. And not from anyone that I've spoken to when I've been knocking on doors either. They mainly are concerned about exploding oil trains and the dangers that are associated with the transportation of oil, or they're concerned about oil itself, you know, the existence of oil, the fact that we use oil, the fact that we put oil in 98% of everything we do and make, things like that we're trying to get away from that. But I see, and I think a lot of that is based on misinformation and the idea that if something is not safe, that we can't do, we have to throw up our arms and say, oh my God, we can't do anything about that. Exploding oil trains, what can we do? Well, we can slow the trains down. We can make the rails better. We can do all sorts of things. We can make the tank cars better. We are very capable at handling all those things. And I think that's the impression that I got from when I stayed till 1:30 in the morning at the city council meeting that morning and listened to people talk. They were not talking about more the livability, unless they were saying they didn't want armpit jobs, which means you don't want a whole sector of your economy. You don't want manufacturing. You don't want blue collar. Come on, that's ridiculous to not want those sorts of jobs. And
So
I think if people had the accurate information regarding this terminal and what is going on at the port right now while they sleep, what they do all the time, that they would not be as against what you're describing as.
Okay, so essentially you don't feel like that's a real issue out there about this sort of like overall livability issue in Vancouver. You don't feel like it's a real issue.
I don't think people realize how big the port is, that we have a real port in our little Vancouver. You go down there and you drive a mile over a bridge to get to the river, which is like 2 miles wide at the side, and big, huge freighters, because they've dredged over 20 years to get it 43 feet deep, are parked out there, 3 of them out in the river, right by our little river, just 2 miles down from our I-5 bridge. And people just don't, they are unloading oil there now. They have really scary stuff now that could, if it were to spill in the Columbia, it would be horrible. But you know what they do? They make containment berms. They put concrete up. They have 110% capacity on every tank that they have. They have fire extinguisher lines with foam in them on the top of every tank that could catch fire, so that there would never be a fire that the the fire department would have to respond to, that hopefully it would go out anyway. But they bought the fire department a foam truck anyway. I mean, I don't think people really understand the kind of industry, because it is industrial land down there by the port, and in industrial land you do industrial things.
Are you angry?
No, I am excited and kind of, I want people to know how great our port is and what they do down there, and how this is just one little slice of it that we're talking about, one little bit of it that we're talking about adding to, that's not even that many acres out when you consider the whole port. And everything that the port has been doing over the last 20 years has been to get ready for tenants like this. We couldn't have the waterfront development if the port didn't move the rail already. I mean, if people just don't understand. And so it gets me a little excited trying to set the record straight.
Oh,
Okay.
Can I weigh in briefly on that?
No.
Soliloquy.
So there's one batch of people who can't work anywhere else, and that's the longshoremen. Plumbers can go over to East Vancouver or to Ridgefield, these various unions can go a lot of different places. The longshoremen are really locked into that footprint. So it kind of meant a lot to me to get their endorsement. Because they don't have somewhere else they can go. A successful port means successful longshoremen. An unsuccessful port means they start losing jobs and having to send people home. One of the things that they cited was that it doesn't really matter where you have a spill, whether it's in Vancouver, whether it's at the Columbia, the mouth of the Columbia, which is kind of famous for being dangerous, or if it's somewhere in between, up in Stevenson. The river shuts down, everybody goes home without work, and that is, it's not a what-if scenario. It's something that we've seen with stunning regularity over and over and over. The last number I heard was something like 13 times in the last 2 years that these rail cars have tipped off the tracks and spilled oil usually into waterways, because they're usually built along waterways. There were two I think it was tugs or tankers or something like that collided in the Mississippi the other day. Shut down the whole Mississippi River. Everyone goes home. No one works that day. And the Mississippi River we're not talking about a small economic impact here. That lack of caution has economic consequences. And that's something that I think we need to weigh when we're looking at potential projects. I'm not sure that's something that really got a whole lot of consideration going into this. But if we're just, even if we just focus on jobs and money, there's an economic argument there to be made for not doing this. And we need to look at things that are going to actually promote what happens in the context of Vancouver.
And we probably, this is a question for both of you, we probably should bring up this, idea that there are some people in Vancouver who believe that the siting of this oil terminal will have an adverse impact on the waterfront project. So to me, it's a twofold question. Do you think the siting of this oil terminal will have an adverse impact on this project, and should that be a factor in whether or not this oil terminal comes?
Well, no, I do not believe that the oil terminal will stop the waterfront development project. When they are, as they've been analyzing the Terminal 1 project, they have done analysis on what kind of rents they would get in office buildings there that are right by the berm, right by the rail going, and they are top dollar rents that they would get right there on the river. And so there doesn't seem to be any adverse property value problems with that. Hopefully, if Terminal 1 gets going and gets started building, that will help cause the waterfront development to have legs, because there will already be people down there on the waterfront, and there will be all that going on. I'm hoping that will help spur that. And it's 2.5 miles from the waterfront development, the terminal that we're talking about. The rails do go by there, but it's 2.5 miles from it. And I have looked at Google Maps at different oil facilities around the nation. There's ones in Port Everglades, Florida, that is right next to $1 million condos that were built after and it's a huge, enormous, there must be 50 tanks there you can look at there. And because there's 1,303 oil terminals in the United States currently, including the one in Vancouver that's already open. So,
no, I mean, you're aware of the person who was trying to get that project off the ground. He believes that it will have an adverse impact.
I know, and he's been trying a while to get that off the ground. So I wish him well. I hope he has the legs to stand for a while, because it sounds like from the reporting that y'all have done that people agree that it is a very long-term project.
How much is too much in terms of an individual category of build out along these lines? My understanding is that the Vancouver proposal would make us the largest of the thousands of oil terminals that you mentioned. Is that right?
That's the numbers that I've heard, that it would be the largest. I've heard a couple of people say that. I haven't seen confirmation or seen volume numbers. Although, the people of Washington have complained about the volume of oil trains, and our state legislature has responded, and they have passed more regulations about notifying about what oil is transferred through. They've increased taxes on it. They've reduced the threshold for federal funds to step in from spills from $50,000 to $1,000. If it costs more than $1,000 to clean up a spill, that we will, then the federal funds will kick in on that. There's refineries are going to have to start reporting all their processing, and so it's the most restrictive and most safety conscious regulations in the country, and Washington is really leading the way in this. There's a lot of things we can't really legislate at our state level, though, because the railroads are kind of by definition interstate commerce. They're original interstate commerce, so you can't control the railroads that way. But I have recently found out about the Pacific Fire and Maritime Association, which after the Exxon Valdez oil spill in 1991, our legislature passed, and Oregon too, because we share the river. So, and they are tasked with the entire Snake River to the mouth of the Columbia system for having plans, and any ship that enters the rough part of the Columbia or any part of the Columbia has to have a spill plan on file with the Pacific Maritime or the Maritime Fire and Safety Association before they can even come in. And if they don't, they have to have like millions of dollars of insurance on their boat. And so there's really, people don't understand that oil trains have been going for a long, long time before they started coming through Vancouver. And people have already been addressing these issues and trying to make them safer, because oil trains spilling and catching fire after they crash don't do any good to anybody.
So my question is more oriented to the degree of scale, not so much those issues, because there are, a proportional build out means one thing, but a largest in the United States build out means something a little different.
And I'm going to have to say that I'm not sure about that largest in the United States, because I have seen the overhead view of Port Everglades, Florida, and it's enormous. And we are only putting in, I think, three big more holding tanks. I think, or they would be putting in 3 more holding tanks for Vancouver Energy. So I think you'd have to go by what definition you're saying by largest.
There's a Wall Street Journal article that actually.
But I mean, what was their definition? Is it just volume, or
actually,
in
I'm
tanks, or?
Aaron, to clarify, wouldn't it be the largest rail to ship terminal?
Yeah, it's my colleague Eric Florp has done reporting on this, and has talked to federal officials, and we've sort of looked at a number of facilities.
So it's that.
So it's not
that
by-
specific type of terminal being rail.
The largest oil by rail facility in the nation.
Oil by rail.
That's what.
So just to clarify.
Okay. So that's
and I don't know how many.
And probably
that
in volume
includes.
is probably what they're talking
So
about.
I
I did want to get an answer from Eric on the waterfront project as to whether or not you think this has a potential adverse impact on the waterfront project, whether or not somebody who might want to buy a condo in there might think twice about buying a condo in there for the oil terminal or something else. I mean, do you think it will have an adverse impact on that project?
I'm not sure there's any way it can't have an adverse impact on it. Ultimately, when it comes down to brass tacks, and you're going to sell, a condo, for example, or someone's going to, do a walkthrough and look around and buy a condo, what are they looking for? They're looking for where they're going to live, where they're going to sleep, where they're going to retire, and so there are going to be trains running through one way or the other, but there are certain soundproofing things that are kind of built into that. It's a harder sell to say, those trains that blow up when they fall off the tracks. We're going to run those through right next door to where you sleep. That's a harder sell. And again, it's not a what if scenario. It's something that's been happening a lot. And when if I'm looking at throwing down a $500,000 or $1 million on a condo, I might think twice.
I have one more oil terminal related question, and then we'll move on because there are other issues related to the port. But for Eric, because Lisa kind of addressed this, she talked about having one energy sector facility there, be it oil or coal, etc. If we oppose the oil terminal, what do we bring in its place? What kind of project should the port be pursuing?
Well, one of the port's biggest tenants right now is actually United Grain. It's about 16 to 17% of American grain exports come through the Port of Vancouver. And that loop track that they built is really ideally suited for that type of commodity, that type of bulk commodity. That's why it's attractive to Tesoro, but that's also why it's attractive to other types of companies. It's a straight shot by rail to the Midwest, whether you're talking about grain, whether you're talking about tractors, and exporting things primarily to Southeast Asia, to China. When their economy is doing well, there are still things that they're buying from the United States, and so we're in a good spot for that. As far as specific types of tenants, it's going to be a job of selling. It's going to be a job of selling the Port of Vancouver and selling those advantages to prospective tenants. The CRADC has done some really deep investigation into this. They're looking at advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, aerospace, and the export of American manufactured goods. The Port of Vancouver is really well set up for that. And those are the types of things that grow Vancouver, that grow the American economy without having these adverse impacts all along the way. So that's where I see our biggest area of opportunity.
We'll move on from the terminal. And we'll start with Lisa. There have been a lot of questions about kind of the culture among the port commissioners and the executives at the port and how they conduct their business, and particularly the use of closed-door meetings. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see any problem there? How would you work within or change that culture?
Well, you can only, it becomes unusual once you get elected to a board of 3, because then it becomes difficult to say hello to people that you would normally speak to on a basis, because, so that will be a challenging part of it, and learning the rules. I'm familiar with the public disclosure and things like that, but learning the rules and getting them down pat to where I feel comfortable. But then I'm not a lawyer, so I will have to rely on legal advice in some situations, I'm sure. But
from what you've seen and what you've read, do you have any concern about the closed-door meetings or how they have acted up to this point?
Well, I'm seeing them promote their meetings more. They always put the agenda on the website, but you have to seek it out. And they've been promoting it more, tweeting quite a bit more. And I would consider moving one of the meetings per month to an evening meeting, so that you could get more participation from the residents and voters that want to know about the port. I think they ought to do more public tours, because again, it would amaze you if you went down to the port. It's amazing. And yeah.
Hey, Eric, your thoughts on the culture down there?
Yeah, we saw when the port was renegotiating their lease with Northwest Pac, those laws, those public disclosure laws, interpreted very, very narrowly, and most of that process, I think, was out in public view, kind of almost on public display, really. So it is possible to interpret those laws more narrowly. I think what we've seen more recently, when it suits the culture, is to interpret those laws very broadly. You only get a certain number of exceptions to public disclosure laws, whether you like it or not. And it's real estate, minimum real estate price, labor negotiation, personnel action, or litigation. And so I think they've tried to put a lot especially under that minimum real estate price umbrella, to where almost anything that could even remotely affect that minimum real estate price is getting under there. And I think it ultimately comes down to where your priorities lie, and where, as a commissioner, where you feel your responsibilities lie. You know, is your responsibility to the potential tenant to protect their trade secrets, to help them stay profitable, or is your responsibility to the taxpayers? And I think that division is really pretty clearly set up. The responsibility to help to attract the potential tenants, to negotiate those details, lies with the port staff. The port commissioner's responsibility is to the taxpayers. That's why they're elected. That's why it's set up that way in state law. There's nothing more un-American than taxation without representation, and that's our representation. They're there to speak for us. Other people can be there on behalf of these companies to advocate for the company, and that's important. And there are people getting paid to do that. But again, the responsibility of those commissioners is to advocate for us and advocate for both the economic well-being and the overall livability of the community that funds it. Really, that pays for the port.
Yet ports are unique in the sense that they are a primary government. That's what I was trying to say earlier. They're a primary government. They don't have to answer to any other government. And that allows them the flexibility to move quicker than other governments without being encumbered by a lot of the laws and encumbrances of other organizations. So, I think that this is probably, and it really gets to your point too, a key difference. The port commissioner's fiduciary duty is to the port. They're elected to support the port and guide the port. And I think that's what they should be elected to do,
But again,
not to fight the port.
But you're aware that, you're absolutely correct, of course, but you're aware that some people look at exactly what you just said and conclude that's the problem. The problem is that these guys are so focused on just bringing business into the port that they're not looking at the larger picture. And I mean, you can appreciate the fact that there are people who say that.
Yes, and I think that the people might not even be looking at the largest picture. They're looking at the larger picture of the city of Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the state of Washington and the revenues that they're going to get because they've increased the per barrel oil that's going through to the state of Washington to include oil by rail. So that's part of the reason that law passed. And you think of the nation, because we can be oil independent and energy independent in 30 years, but we need to get this Bakken oil out. This is part of the plan to be energy independent. And it is such a blessing that they discovered ways to get this oil, because when you talk to geologists, they just get giddy about this oil and how much of less of a carbon footprint it takes to process the oil. So it is greener than the oil that we use.
But aren't some geologists saying this is creating earthquakes?
I'm not going to debate fracking with you.
Well, you brought up geologists, I just thought
Well, I'm a geologist talking about the oil. I haven't talked to any geologists about fracking. So.
okay, but you are aware that there are some people who believe that it does create earthquakes.
Right.
Okay.
A lot of people believe a lot of things.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, just to camp on that particular thing having to do with the international picture here, some people worry about a international marketplace happening with the oil being shipped offshore. Do you support that? What do you answer that to?
I haven't really formed an opinion on that. I know that the oil embargo was put in the early 70s, and it's been in place for a long time. I had to learn how it's separated from the Jones Act, but so I haven't really looked at that, and I'm not going to take a position on that as a port commissioner.
You kind of framed it up with this idea of energy independence. One of the things
Right.
that I kind of wondered is, does the opportunity to be a little less dependent on the Middle East for oil, maybe is it some kind of a trade-off for developing that for national interest?
I think since we're discussing it as an opportunity for that realistically American oil should stay in America. We shouldn't be shipping it overseas to China. Period. We have the ability.
And we're not.
We have the ability to build pipelines if that's what's necessary. But I think throwing it on ships and taking its chances out in the ocean is, just so that we can ship it to China is probably not what's best for us. It might be what's best in Houston. It might be what's best for Wall Street, but that's not what's best for Vancouver. It's not what's best for America. We mentioned, getting this oil to the ocean, and I think oil companies have done a great job of getting the oil to the ocean. It's keeping it out of the ocean that they really have a hard time with. So,
Let me ask a campaign contribution question, and I'll go to both of you, but Lisa, obviously you know that David Medora, Councilman David Medora gave your campaign $10,000. Does that make you queasy at all, or do you embrace that support from Councilman Medora?
I embrace support from successful business people.
He
And
is
I
a
did
successful-
not request that big a donation, but it was pretty exciting because bizarrely, and I'm not sure why, but in the law, there are no contribution limits in the Port Commission races, which is just bizarre and it's something I'm very unaccustomed to. And it made it a little easier campaigning. But other than that, I mean, I am campaigning to continue the Port's record of being a successful business, and so successful businessmen supporting my campaign proves my point.
Including Councilman Medora, who was a successful
He's a
businessman.
very successful businessman. He's made a lot of money.
Do you have any?
I'm sorry, let me jump in though. Why do you think that he provided you so much support?
I know that, when I was appointed to the Public Facilities District Board, they did a long interview with the three commissioners and I, and he saw my resume and understood where I was coming from, and he said that he really believed in me and the kind of person that I was, and that, like, even when they told me that there was no PDC limits, I had to call the PDC because that was just so bizarre. So trust but verify that he felt that I could be trusted with the Port's future.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah. So how are your contributions going?
I haven't. I did not get a check from David Medora.
You get any? What's your biggest contribution?
My biggest individual contributor right now is actually someone who works over in Portland, lives in Vancouver. He came to Vancouver to retire, and doesn't want to see it rebranded as a petroleum town.
And who's that?
I'm
Forgetting
drawing a
his
blank
name?
on his name at the
That's
moment.
the last bit of money you're getting from him.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have my phone
But-
looking at
Do you know how much money it was?
That was $1,000.
Okay.
Yeah. And I asked him about that. I said, so what motivated you to donate? And that's what it came down to. He sees the livability of Vancouver and doesn't want that changed. He wants Vancouver to continue to be a vibrant place. I've gotten donations from several successful local businesses, and some of them have talked about livability. A lot of them have talked about how things at the port impact their business. There's a gentleman named Don Orange of Hosley Eco Automotive. It's right over on Washington, and he owns an auto shop, and he's talked about how the waterfront project would actually boost his customer base. And that's a really common recurring theme. People move to Vancouver on purpose because of the beautiful town that we have. I don't have a $10,000 contributor at this point, but we've got enough $100 contributors and $200 contributors to make up for that. And if you're beholden to, in any way at all, to people who donate, I'm beholden to the community. I'm beholden to private individuals who care about what's happening here and don't want to see their hard work flushed, frankly, and don't want to see the economy flushed and go back to what it was 10 years ago, or go back to what you might see in a Texas oil town.
Question for both of you. I'll start with Lisa. It's obviously a possibility that this oil terminal will happen. I mean, we know that. Let's assume, for the sake of this question, that it doesn't happen. Will the port still be very successful?
Yes.
Okay. Will the port be very successful if it doesn't happen?
I think so. I think it'll take a lot of work, but yeah.
Okay.
And Lisa, you mentioned that the port is a primary government. It's
Yeah.
its own entity.
Right.
What do you think of its current tax rate? Should that be raised, lowered? What-
Well, the past several years, because the Port of Commissioners get to vote every 2 years, every budget, on how much to set our property, their portion of the property tax. And they've been setting it right about $10 million because of certain revenue bonds they had to have secured by it. One of those is going to be paid off, and so we will have less to have to bond. And the West Vancouver freight finished early and under budget, and so that makes it, I think that we should cut the port's portion of the property tax down to half of that, maybe to $5 million a year, because it's profitable without our property taxes. The Port of Columbian has never taken any property taxes. I don't know that we could go that far because we really like to make investments in infrastructure, but I would like to see that portion cut in half.
Eric?
I don't know that that's actually a possibility. Those tax revenues are encumbered by bonds. You know, so the port has taken out debt that essentially requires us to continue collecting that until those are paid off. I mean, sure, who wouldn't love to have, you know, lower taxes? But it's not. I don't think it's actually possible to do away with them at this point. Longer term, that might be something worth looking at. But I mean, it's without defaulting on a large amount of debt. I'm not sure that's actually a real possibility. Frankly, at this point, when someone tells me that they want to cut taxes, I usually wait to see what they're selling. So.
I'm selling the fact that we have a very profitable port, and that we don't need as much tax revenue as we've been taking from you.
A few meetings ago, Nancy Baker made a statement at a meeting that, I mean, if you sort of cut through it all, she said that she was getting a little fed up with the way in which some of those who were speaking at the meeting were reacting or speaking. What's your view on that? And I'll go with you first, Eric. We know that meetings can get a little bombastic at times. We've seen it in a lot of different places. We understand the beauty of decorum. At the end of the day, democracy is a bit of a messy business. And I'm wondering if it may have surprised you at all on her reaction to that. Are you aware of this?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was a little bit surprised. That whole thing is kind of an unfortunate situation in my mind. I don't think that was necessarily the right response, and there is, I suppose, a certain amount of that probably comes with the territory when you're in a position like that. You're going to have people disagree with you. Certainly, emotions are running really high right now because people are, very deeply concerned about what's going on there. I'm not sure that's the right response. At the same time, having spoken with her privately, I also understand part of where that's coming from, which is that she's I think received some calls that are highly inappropriate, and some of the things that have been said coming from the other direction haven't been appropriate. So I don't know. It's hard to. I don't think there are any winners in a situation like that.
Lisa, your view on that?
Well, Nancy has taken a lot of grief for this decision because a lot of her friends are aligned on the other side, and so she's taken grief from people that have been her friends for a long time. She is endorsing my campaign for the port, for the future of the port, and I have gotten a little taste of what she's talking about on Facebook. If anybody's ever seen any of my posts, there's some really mean people and you don't mind comments that have facts and things like that, or they're not saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. But part of this job is listening to the public, but I don't think it should be being attacked by the public. There should be some level of decorum that we all share and together, because we live in a civilized society and we should act that way. But everybody should have a chance to be heard, for sure.
But did you feel like her response at that public meeting was appropriate then?
I did not hear what was said all up, leading up into that response, so, but I can understand if someone gets, it's hard to be on camera all the time, you know, it's very
It is.
difficult.
Thank you.
Great. Well, we'll move on then and give you both a chance to give us your final pitch of why voters should support you, and feel free to mention any significant endorsements if you like. And we'll start there.
I think that if we're looking at the business case for how things should be done at the port, I think it's fairly clear that we need to be building businesses that will make sense 20, 30, 50 years into the future. That's what we as taxpayers are investing in. We have a right to know what's going on down at the port, and we also have a right to a return on that investment. I think it's the broad array of candidates that we saw before the primary signals that voters are ready for a change. That it needs to be not just business as usual. We need to be looking ahead. As far as major endorsements, I've been endorsed by the local firefighters union. I've been endorsed by the local longshoremen union, former Mayor Royce Pollard, current Mayor Tim Levitt, former City Council member Pat Gelada, and there are more names available on my website. It's ericforport.com. But really, I think at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what people see as their vision for Vancouver. And not just what we see for the Vancouver of the future, but how we look at Vancouver now. Do we look at it as a vibrant community? Do we look at it as a place to be apologized for, that we should just kind of take whatever we can get? I see Vancouver as a pretty fantastic place to live, and I want to build on that. I want to bring my business experience to bear on that, and I also want to bring my experience in the community to bear on that.
Great. Thank you. Lisa?
We are in danger in Vancouver of becoming a community that has the reputation of running businesses off. And if we continue with that sort of a reputation, we're not going to build the waterfront development project for sure, unless Portland has a population explosion that they move over here. We can't always pick what freight is flowing. I've said that already. And freight is not always going to flow for 50 years. There are booms in different activities over the years, and if it's not properly planned after the boom, then there can be some fallout. But before the fallout, there was a boom. There was a big old boom. And things to remember about some Texas oil towns is there was also a hurricane in addition to the Texas oil closings there. So we cannot blame all of things boarded up there. But Vancouver is a vibrant city with a diverse economic profile that we need to maintain that diverse economic profile. And an oil terminal way away from the city is not going to become the face of Vancouver in any way unless we let it become the face of Vancouver. And if we don't want it to, then we just need to keep recruiting other businesses and add them to the mix in our melting pot of a society that we have here, because we do, and it's a place to be proud of, and the port is a place to be proud of, and people should never apologize for the port because it does amazing work there that is necessary for our country and the world and our area.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, endorsements?
Endorsements: the Vancouver Business Journal, Clark County Republican Party, Representative Liz Pike, Representative Brandon Vick, Representative Paul Harris, among others.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you both for your time. Thanks for coming.
Thanks.